Good afternoon from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. You're looking live at Space Launch Complex 40, where a Falcon 9 rocket is standing vertical. 53 more Starlink internet satellites are on board this vehicle, awaiting liftoff this afternoon, at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 21:27 UTC. This will be the 151st launch of a Falcon 9 rocket, and the third Falcon 9 flight from launch pads here on Florida's Space Coast in the last 8 days. Everything right now appears to be on schedule for liftoff at 5:27 p.m., less than 1 hour and 5 minutes from now. SpaceX rolled the Falcon 9 rocket out of its hangar at pad 40 overnight and lifted it vertical on the launch pad early this morning in preparation for today's launch opportunity at 5:27 p.m. Eastern. Weather conditions today appear to be favorable. It is windy, it is breezy. You may hear some of the wind noise occasionally in my mic here at the Kennedy Space Center. But right now the winds are believed to be within the launch limit for a Falcon 9 rocket. Skies are mostly sunny, and the downrange recovery weather for the first stage booster is also apparently favorable today. There was a low risk of any violation in regards to recovery weather. SpaceX's drone ship, Just Read the Instructions, is on station in the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of the Carolinas for landing of the first stage. This mission will follow a familiar profile for those of you who have watched any of SpaceX's Starlink missions before. The Falcon 9 will head northeast from Florida's Space Coast out over the Atlantic Ocean. The first stage will shut down and detach about 2.5 minutes after liftoff and come back to Earth, targeting a landing, a propulsive touchdown on the football field-sized landing platform in the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, the second stage will fire 2 times to place the 53 Starlink internet satellites into the proper orbit nearly 200 miles above Earth. Separation of those Starlink satellites is expected about an hour after launch. SpaceX's launch team is on console right now at the SpaceX Control Center just south of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Engineers inside that room are monitoring various systems on the Falcon 9 and preparing to begin the countdown auto sequencer at T-minus 35 minutes. That auto sequence will use a computer or computers to oversee the loading of propellants into the Falcon 9 rocket. Kerosene and liquid oxygen will be loaded into the Falcon 9 beginning at that milestone, at that point in the countdown at T-minus 35 minutes. And that all leads up to a target launch time of 5:27 p.m. and 10 seconds, 5:27:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And for those of you at other locations around the world and other time zones, that is 21:27 UTC or 2:27 p.m. Pacific Time. Again, you're looking live at Space Launch Complex 40, where the Falcon 9 is vertical at this hour. A little more than an hour from liftoff right now from pad 40 with 53 Starlink internet satellites. Now inside of 1 hour until launch time, T-minus 59 minutes and 22 seconds. If you look just to the right of the vehicle, the Falcon 9 rocket on the ground level near the bottom of one of the 4 lightning towers, you can see some venting there. You can also see a security helicopter making its pass behind the rocket. This is a normal part of a security sweep before every launch here at Cape Canaveral. The venting you see is associated with some of the preparations to begin tanking the Falcon 9. That tanking will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. So as you can see, activity already underway out of the launch pad to prepare for this launch of 53 Starlink Internet satellites at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time, or 21:27 UTC. Now about 23 minutes until the start of propellant loading. SpaceX's countdown just passed T-minus 53 minutes. You're continuing to look at a live view of Space Launch Complex 40. The Falcon 9 out on pad 40 stands 229 feet tall, or 70 meters in height. The first stage flying on this mission is booster number 1062 in SpaceX's fleet. It'll be making its sixth flight. It flew previously just 3 weeks ago today, 21 days ago, on April the 8th, with Axiom's private crew mission up to the International Space Station. It launched from pad 39A, a few miles to the north. And this will mark the fastest turnaround between launches for a particular specific Falcon 9 booster. Some venting from the tank farm continues to be visible just above the tree line in our view of pad 40. This is an indicator that preparations at the pad are underway for tanking of the Falcon 9. All personnel at this time should be evacuated from the launch pad, and the launch team is stationed at SpaceX Launch Control a few miles to the south of the pad, now inside of 52 minutes until liftoff. Now, just inside of T-minus 48 minutes and counting, you're continuing to look live at Space Launch Complex 40, where SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket is awaiting liftoff at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time, or 21:27 UTC. This mission is carrying another batch of 53 Starlink Internet satellites into orbit. These 53 satellites are packed inside the payload fairing of the Falcon 9 on top of the vehicle. The view you see here on the left is a file photo before a previous Starlink mission showing what the satellites look like inside the payload fairing. They're flat packed. Each one of them weighs about 250 to 300 kilograms. And collectively, the 53 Starlink satellites make up the heaviest payload that the Falcon 9s carry into orbit, heavier than even the Crew Dragon spacecraft that flies up to the space station. In this view, inside a SpaceX clean room, you see one half of the payload fairing prepared for encapsulation onto the Starlink satellites. Again, this photo is from a previous mission. So there are 53 spacecraft on board. Each one of them weighs a little more than a quarter ton. They're fitted with solar panels that unfurl once they separate from the Falcon 9. They're held down onto the Falcon 9 by 4 retention rods. Those retention rods are actually released once the rocket is in the correct altitude and inclination for separation, and that allows the Starlink satellites to fly free of the Falcon 9 upper stage in space. They then fire up their Krypton-fueled ion engines to raise their orbits up to operational altitude of 335 miles or 540 kilometers. This is what a user terminal looks like. These antennas are produced by SpaceX, so Starlink subscribers, Starlink users can obtain or buy one of these antennas from SpaceX. Comes with a modem, and that allows the user to connect with the Starlink network as the satellites fly overhead. Global service is enabled by the Starlink Internet Network, and SpaceX is currently in the midst of deploying its first generation network, which will comprise roughly 4,400 satellites. About 2,100 active satellites are currently in space, not including the 53 that will be launched today. Now T-minus 45 minutes and 25 seconds, about 10 minutes away from the start of propellant loading out at pad 40. Everything continues to look good for an on-time launch of this mission. This mission is numbered Starlink 4-16. Again, 53 spacecraft awaiting liftoff in 45 minutes' time. SpaceX's countdown is approaching T-minus 39 minutes, about 4 minutes away from when we should hear confirmation of the start of propellant loading. Right now, SpaceX's launch team at the control center south of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station is being polled for a go or no-go for propellant loading and launch. This is the final formal checkpoint for the entire launch team to voice or to enter their go or no-go status electronically for liftoff today. Once again, you're looking live at SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket out on pad 40. Now 38 minutes from launch. Again, we're standing by for the start of propellant loading in about 3 minutes time. These labels show the various components of the Falcon 9 rocket. The first stage is the structure comprising about the lower 2/3 of the vehicle. By itself, it stands about 15 stories tall, and you can see it has scorch marks from its previous missions. This will be the 6th flight to space for this booster, tail number 1062 in SpaceX's fleet. Above that is the black band of the interstage adapter, where the grid fins are located to help us steer the booster back to Earth. Above that is the brand new second stage. The second stage for all Falcon 9s is built new for every flight. It's the only major component that is not reusable. And that is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine. That MVAC engine burns the same kerosene and liquid oxygen propellants as the 9 first stage engines. And then above that is the payload fairing, which stretches about 16 to 17 feet in diameter. And inside that payload shroud are the 53 Starlink internet satellites ready for their ride to space to join SpaceX's internet network today. Liftoff is scheduled for 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time, or 21:27 UTC. We just heard confirmation that the tanks on board the Falcon 9 are venting in preparation for the start of propellant loading. That's a good sign that propellant loading will begin on time at T-minus 35 minutes.
This is LD on countdown, go for prop load. Launch auto sequence has started.
Now T-minus 33 minutes and 35 seconds. About 90 seconds ago, you heard confirmation that the propellants are being loaded into the Falcon 9. About 1 million pounds of kerosene and liquid oxygen will be loaded into both stages of the vehicle. So the countdown is progressing for a liftoff at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time, 21:27 UTC. Everything looking good for launch of SpaceX's 17th flight of the year. So this will be the 17th mission that SpaceX has launched in 4 months to begin 2022. And it will be the 6th launch of April, the first time that SpaceX will have launched 6 missions, 6 Falcon rocket missions in a single calendar month. Once again, the countdown clock you're seeing in the upper right is counting down to today's precise launch time of 5:27 and 10 seconds, 5:27:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 21:27:10 UTC, 30 minutes and 7 seconds from this moment. Now T-minus 30 minutes mark. 30 minutes to go until the launch of Starlink 4-16 on board a Falcon 9 rocket. You're starting to see the first signs of frost and ice buildup on the outer structure, the skin of the Falcon 9 first stage. That liquid oxygen is chilled several hundred degrees below zero, so it does create a sheen of frost and shiny ice on the outer airframe of the booster. And you're seeing that the band of light is actually located at the bottom of the liquid oxygen tank. So it's pretty cool. You'll be able to see the liquid oxygen tank be filled up and the approximate level of the liquid oxygen in the tank as that frost creeps up the length or the height of that vehicle. RP1 kerosene is also being loaded into the lower tank of the booster that's below the liquid oxygen tank. Kerosene being the fuel, liquid oxygen being the oxidizer, and those propellants are mixed inside the turbopumps of the Merlin engines to produce 1.7 million pounds of combined thrust at liftoff. Now T-minus 28 minutes and 8 seconds. Helium pressurant is also being loaded into the vehicle. This is the cryogenic that is used to pressurize and maintain pressure inside the propellant tanks as the Falcon 9 consumes the fuel and oxidizer in flight. Now less than 28 minutes to go in the countdown. This countdown timeline on the left of your screen shows the major events in the countdown. So we've passed the T-minus 38 minute and 35 minute points with liquid oxygen and kerosene loading already underway at this time. At T-minus 20 minutes, the second stage kerosene tank should be fully loaded. And at that point, the chill down or thermal conditioning of the liquid oxygen lines leading up to the second stage will begin. And you'll see that purge, that chill down begin when a big vent appears from the strong back next to the Falcon 9 vehicle. That's a big indicator that the Falcon 9 countdown is on schedule. At T-minus 16 minutes, the liquid oxygen will actually begin loading into the second stage, that white, shiny new part of the rocket between the booster and the fairing. And then at T-minus 7 minutes, the Merlin 1D engines at the bottom of the first stage will begin their chill down procedure. This is a procedure that involves flowing small quantities, small amounts of super cold propellant through the plumbing in the engine section of the Falcon 9. And it thermally conditions those components and that hardware for flight. At roughly T-minus 5 minutes, actually T-minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds, is when the first stage kerosene tank should be fully loaded. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be full of kerosene fuel, RP1, rocket-grade kerosene. About 46,000 gallons of that kerosene will be loaded into the vehicle today. And then at T-minus 1 minute, the Falcon 9 transitions to internal power. The flight computer begins the final pre-launch checkouts, and the propellant tanks begin their process to pressurize inside that last 60 seconds. SpaceX's launch director will voice their final go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. And then the engine ignition sequence begins at T-minus 3 seconds. That involves an igniter fluid to fire up those 9 Merlin engines positioned in an octaweb configuration with 9 engines at the bottom of the first stage. And then, of course, when the clock hits 0, hydraulic clamps will release, freeing the Falcon 9 to begin its vertical climb from pad 40. This Falcon 9 vehicle will be heading northeast from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, out over the Atlantic Ocean. The red band you see here is the ground track that the Falcon 9 will be following, heading northeast from Space Launch Complex 40. The location of SpaceX's drone ship, just read the instructions, roughly 400 miles downrange, is noted also in this map. That's where the first stage booster will attempt to make its landing. It'll be traveling that approximate 400-mile or 630-kilometer distance in 8 minutes and 24 seconds from liftoff until touchdown. Now T-minus 24 minutes and 44 seconds. About 5 minutes away now from that big vent and from the time at which the second stage should be fully loaded into the vehicle. Again, right now kerosene, liquid oxygen, and helium pressurant are being loaded into the Falcon 9 24.5 minutes from liftoff. Now T-minus 22 minutes and 49 seconds, you're seeing that liquid oxygen tank beginning to be filled up now on the first stage, the ice and frost level creeping up the height of the first stage booster. That first stage showing the marks, scorch marks from its flight history. 5 flights in the books for this booster. This will be its 6th mission for booster number 1062. It first flew back on November 5th of 2020 with a GPS satellite, the GPS 3-4 spacecraft, the navigation satellite for the United States Space Force. And the U.S. Space Force tagged that booster to use again on its next GPS flight last June. And at that point, SpaceX refurbished the booster for the flight of the Inspiration 4 private astronaut mission, carrying a crew of 4 private citizens to low Earth orbit on September 14th of last year. And then it launched again in January with the Starlink 4-5 mission. And most recently, it launched just 21 days ago, 3 weeks ago today, with the AX-1 mission for Axiom Space, carrying 4 people up to the International Space Station, the first private astronaut mission to go to the International Space Station. And the booster landed on the drone ship. After that flight, it was returned to Port Canaveral and broken over to a horizontal position and taken to a refurbishment facility for some brief refurbishment and inspections. And then mated with a second stage and rolled back out to the hangar at Pad 40 to meet with its payload, the payload for this mission being 53 Starlink satellites, and then rolled out to Pad 40 overnight last night. This will be the fastest turnaround ever for a single Falcon 9 booster. The previous record was 27 days, SpaceX going for 21 days with this turnaround culminating in launch now less than 21 minutes away. We're standing by for the next major event, which will be the completion of RP-1 kerosene fuel loading into the second stage, followed by chill down and the big vent from the strongback.
Stage 2, RP-1 load is complete.
Now approaching T-minus 19 minutes and counting. This mission will take about 1 hour from liftoff until deployment of the 53 Starlink satellites. Again, the rocket will be heading northeast from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, heading out over the Atlantic Ocean, flying parallel to the east coast of the United States, and just off the coast of eastern Canada, the Canadian Maritime provinces. In about a minute, the Falcon 9 will already be past the speed of sound. At T plus 1 minute 12 seconds, it'll pass the peak aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle during the flight. 2.5 minutes after launch, the 9 first stage engines will cut off and the booster will separate. To begin its descent back toward the drone ship, just read the instructions. And the second stage will take over with its single Merlin vacuum engine. That MVAC engine will fire about 6 minutes or so to place the Starlink satellites into a parking or preliminary orbit, and the payload fairing early on in that burn will be jettisoned at T plus 2 minutes and 50 seconds. SpaceX's recovery team is also in position downrange to pull those fairing halves out of the water. The first stage landing is expected at T+8 minutes 24 seconds. And after engine cutoff of the second stage will coast over the North Atlantic, over Europe and the Middle East, and reignite over the Indian Ocean for a very brief, approximately 2-second burn to maneuver the 53 Starlink satellites into their targeted deployment orbit nearly 200 miles above Earth, setting the stage for deployment of the 53 satellites at T+59 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, the booster is heading for a landing on the drone ship. This graphic from SpaceX shows the generic flight profile for missions such as this, showing the first stage's detachment from the second stage and its flip maneuver to begin entering the atmosphere tail first, and then culminating in a vertical propulsive landing on 4 landing legs on the deck of, just read the instructions, the drone ship positioned 400 miles or so downrange.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Now 15 minutes until launch. In this view of Launch Complex 40, you're continuing to see the frost and ice rise in its orientation or position on the first stage booster. This indicating the progress that SpaceX is making in tanking the first stage with the super cold oxidizer. Its temperature, again, is several hundred degrees below zero, and that causes frost and ice to build up as expected on the outer skin, and you're seeing the approximate level that the liquid oxygen is at in the tank in this view of the frost and ice on the booster stage. This mission is going to be the 151st flight of a Falcon 9 rocket, and it's the 159th orbital launch attempt of SpaceX's Falcon rocket family since 2006. That includes the company's previous Falcon 1 rocket, as well as the Falcon Heavy, which is comprised of 3 Falcon 9 booster stages bolted together. This is the 6th flight, as we've discussed, for this particular booster, and it's the 132nd Falcon 9 launch from Florida's Space Coast from Pad 40 or Pad 39A. It's the 85th Falcon 9 launch to originate from Pad 40, which is what you're looking at now on the right side of your screen. It's the pad that SpaceX has most often used for its flight history, and it's the 140th flight overall from this launch pad, including the Falcon 9 rocket missions that it's hosted, as well as previous missions using the Air Force's Titan rocket family, most recently the Titan IV, which last flew from this launch pad about 20 years ago or so, before it was converted over to SpaceX's use for the Falcon 9. Again, this booster is previously flown. It's the 34th flight of a SpaceX Falcon 9 to be powered by a reused booster. It's the 43rd launch of a Falcon 9 with a primary payload of Starlink internet satellites. And it's the 17th Falcon 9 launch from Florida or California so far this year. 17 launches in 4 months to start 2022. And it's also the 17th orbital launch attempt out of the Florida spaceport to start the year. That includes previous missions, mostly SpaceX missions, but also a couple of United Launch Alliance Atlas V flights, as well as a launch attempt with Astra's small satellite booster. So now T-minus 12 minutes and 20 seconds until liftoff of the Starlink 4-16 mission with 53 spacecraft on board. Now T-minus 8 minutes and 38 seconds. In about 90 seconds or so, the chill down of the Merlin engines at the bottom of the first stage will begin. You're seeing the ice now nearing the top of the liquid oxygen tank on the first stage, indicating that the propellant loading is now in its final phases. Kerosene will be terminated, load will be terminated into stage 1 at T-minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And liquid oxygen will stop loading into both stages about 2 minutes or so before liftoff. T-minus 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Now T-minus 6 minutes and 47 seconds. The engine chill down
has started
on the Merlin first stage engines now underway. This involves flowing small amounts of super cold propellant into those into the engine plumbing to condition those components for flight. This chill down is necessary to make sure that the hardware is not damaged or suffers any shock when the propellants begin flowing at rapid rates during engine startup. At this point in the countdown, the Falcon 9's guidance system is also being confirmed. It's ready for flight. The autonomous flight safety system on board the Falcon 9 will also be configured and confirmed ready for launch in the next couple of minutes. This is the system that will be used to autonomously destroy the vehicle if it veers off its pre-approved flight corridor on a track or heading northeast from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We've heard confirmation that the Stage 1 kerosene or RP1 load is complete. So the Falcon 9 is fully loaded at this time with 46,000 gallons of rocket-grade, highly refined kerosene. The other propellant that's used in a mix with for the Merlin engines is liquid oxygen. That oxidizer will continue flowing until about the T-minus 2 minute mark.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
Now T-minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds. In the next few moments, the strong back, which is the structure next to the Falcon 9, will be retracted. Clamps will open around the second stage to allow that strong back to retract to an angle of about 1.5 to 1.7 degrees from the Falcon 9 airframe or fuselage. At liftoff, that strong back will begin a rapid retract maneuver to clear the way for the Falcon 9 to begin its vertical climb. We've heard confirmation now that the strong back structure is being retracted. T-minus 4 minutes. T-minus 3 minutes and 15 seconds. In the next few moments, we'll hear confirmation that the liquid oxygen load into the second stage and the first stage has been terminated. At that point, the lines that flow propellants will stop pumping liquid oxygen into both stages of the rocket, and the rocket will be fully loaded with about 1 million pounds of liquid
Stage 1
propellant
LOX load
for
is
liftoff.
complete.
And you just heard Stage 1 LOX load is complete. T-minus 2.5 minutes. T-minus 2 minutes. 2 minutes until launch of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 4-16 mission. The Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds. You can see that first stage has, in the last half hour, transitioned from its dark charcoal color to a bright white where that liquid oxygen has been loaded. 1 million pounds of propellants on board for liftoff in 1 minute, 40 seconds.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Ground gas closeouts.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
T-minus 45 seconds. We heard that call out moments ago that the Falcon 9 is in startup. Falcon 9 now on internal power. The vents on the propellant tanks are being closed to allow those tanks to pressurize for flight. T-minus 32 seconds. And we've heard the final go from SpaceX's launch
Falcon
director.
9, Starlink 416, LD is go for launch.
30 seconds.
T-minus 15 seconds. We'll stand by for the final count from SpaceX. T plus 20 seconds, Falcon 9 heading downrange with 53 Starlink satellites. The rumble now being heard here at the Kennedy Space Center. T plus 40 seconds. Falcon 9 soaring through some cloud cover now, heading downrange northeast. 1.7 million pounds of thrust from 9 Merlin engines, powering the Falcon 9 into space this evening. The 151st flight of a Falcon 9 rocket now underway. T plus 1 minute 35 seconds. Falcon 9 a few moments ago passed the speed of sound. It's past max Q, or the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now rocketing into the stratosphere. Beautiful launch here this afternoon at Cape Canaveral. Those 9 Merlin engines continuing their work for another 30 or 40 seconds or so. Standing by for main engine cutoff. And there's main engine cutoff. Those 9 first stage engines have shut down. Their job now complete, their primary task now complete. They'll be reignited for descent. We've had stage separation, and we see visual confirmation now that the second stage is firing.
We've now switched over to SpaceX's feed showing some onboard camera views, with the Falcon 9 now passing out of visual range here at Cape Canaveral. The SpaceX feed is on a slight delay, so you may have seen the video feed jump back in time somewhat. But this shows the first stage of the Falcon 9 having deployed its titanium grid fins on the left side of the screen, looking back toward Florida, some scattered cloud cover looking right back at us at our location at Cape Canaveral. On the right side, the Merlin vacuum engine firing, the MVAC engine, generating about 200,000 pounds of thrust with that red-hot nozzle. That glow is normal. Everything looking good so far with this flight. The Falcon 9 booster stage has reached its apogee, the highest point of its trajectory. Now soaring over the Atlantic Ocean, those cold gas thrusters occasionally firing to maintain its proper orientation. Seeing the entry burn now underway, 3 Merlin engines, 3 of the 9 engines at the bottom of the first stage firing. Seeing the velocity begin to rapidly decrease. This was putting on the brakes now for the Falcon booster stage to make its descent back into the thick lower layers of the atmosphere. And there's entry burn shutdown. Looked like a nominal or an expected entry burn now completed. On the right, you see the second stage passing 16,000 kilometers per hour, screaming into orbit with 53 Starlink satellites. Now, around 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes from first stage landing. Now approaching 7.5 minutes into the flight. Everything's looking right on the money with both stages right now. We'll see the landing burn momentarily on the first stage on the left side of your screen. Landing of the first stage is expected about 30 seconds before engine cutoff of the second stage, so these two events will be happening in quick succession. Landing burn now underway. Onboard views on the left side of your screen showing the booster beginning its final descent toward the drone ship. Landing is confirmed. The first stage booster, as you saw, made its on-target descent right about in the middle of the bullseye on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Its 6th trip to space now complete, and SpaceX has successfully reflown this booster for the 2nd time in 21 days, a new rocket reuse record. And we've heard confirmation of SECO-1, 2nd stage engine cutoff confirmed. Falcon 9 now in its parking orbit and nominal orbital insertion also confirmed. So the 2nd stage will be coasting in space for the next 35 minutes or so, 36 minutes, until a brief restart of that MVAC engine for an orbit circularization maneuver that will place the 53 Starlink satellites in the proper altitude and inclination for separation. We're looking now at a map showing the ground track of the Falcon 9 first stage and the 2nd stage. The first stage, as you can see, is on the deck of the drone ship. Its location marked in this map provided by SpaceX. The 2nd stage coasting now in orbit after achieving a parking orbit after the first burn of that 2nd stage. Flying over the North Atlantic Ocean, it'll be heading south of Iceland and eventually over the UK and over parts of Europe. And eventually, at T+45 minutes, it'll be over the Indian Ocean, and that'll be the point at which the 2nd stage engine will be reignited briefly. SpaceX has concluded its live webcast, so we don't expect to see any more live views of the engine during the 2nd burn or the Starlink separation event at T+59 minutes and 30 seconds, but we're going to stay live because the mission is not complete until the 53 Starlink satellites are placed in the proper orbit. So we'll continue showing this map, which SpaceX is providing to us at this moment, and we'll be calling out when we hear confirmation of 2nd stage restart and spacecraft separation. That restart now 33 minutes away, and separation roughly 47 minutes from now. Now T plus 14 minutes, 50 seconds. You can see the second stage passing south of Greenland over the North Atlantic. Everything looking good so far with this flight. A good liftoff at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time to begin the Starlink 4-16 mission. Now 15 minutes into the flight, about a half hour remaining until engine restart for a very brief 2-second burn, and then about 45 minutes away from payload separation.
Expected loss of signal, New Finland. Acquisition of signal, Goonhilly.
Now T plus 22 minutes and 26 seconds. The Falcon 9 second stage has just passed over the UK, now approaching Germany at this point, heading southeast. It'll be heading out over Eastern Europe, over the Black Sea, and then over parts of Turkey and the Middle East over the next few minutes. The upper stage is on track right now for restart of the Merlin vacuum engine, a very brief burn at T plus 45 minutes and 22 seconds. So that's about 22 and a half minutes from now.
Expected loss of signal, Goon Heli.
Now nearly 28 minutes since the Falcon 9 lifted off, the second stage of Falcon 9 now over Turkey heading southeast. In this ground track it'll be passing over looks like parts of Iraq and then Saudi Arabia just west of the Persian Gulf before heading out over the Indian Ocean. 53 Starlink internet satellites are on board. This file photo from SpaceX shows what those Starlink satellites look like while they're flat packed on the second stage of the Falcon 9. So that's very much what the Starlink payloads look like on board the rocket during the ascent into space and into orbit. This photo from a previous mission, a file photo showing the Starlink satellites in the clean room. There are 53 of these on board. Each of them weigh about a quarter ton. They're built in Redmond, Washington by SpaceX on an assembly line. This is the 43rd launch to carry Starlink internet satellites into space. 43rd dedicated launch to carry Starlink satellites into space. These satellites are fitted with solar panels to produce electricity. Those solar panels will unfurl after the spacecraft deploy from the Falcon 9 upper stage, and then they'll switch on their ion propulsion systems. Those engines will maneuver the satellites individually from their drop-off orbit nearly 200 miles above Earth to their operational altitude at 335 miles at an inclination of 53.2 degrees to the equator. This is what Starlink consumers use to hook up with the internet service provided by the satellites, including the 53 that are on their way to orbit this evening. The square dish is available from SpaceX. So Starlink consumers can use this dish to set it up in an area with a clear view of the sky and connect with the satellites as they pass overhead, allowing users anywhere in the world to connect to broadband internet. Now 30 minutes since launch.
For the final.
Now T plus 33 minutes and 50 seconds. In case you missed the launch, the liftoff occurred at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time, or 21:27 UTC, from Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on the Starlink 4-16 mission carrying 53 satellites to orbit. And if you missed the launch 34 minutes ago, here's a replay.
Falcon 9 takes our 53 Starlink satellites into orbit.
15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff for Starlink. Go Falcon. Go Starlink 416. Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40, carrying our 53 Starlink satellites. Now, although at liftoff gravity is pulling the vehicle straight down, as we ascend, we tilt the engines.
Power and telemetry nominal.
And tilting those engines is called gimbaling. That turns the rocket horizontally, and you can kind of see that there on your screen. So we are still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. And that is what we call a gravity turn. And we are coming up on max Q here in a few seconds.
Max Q.
And there's that call out that we've just passed through max Q. Now that's the largest structural load that the vehicle sees on ascent, and we have passed through it. So next up will be a series of events. First will be MECO, or main engine cutoff, and that's where all 9 of the Merlin engines will shut down. And that slows the vehicle down in preparation for the second milestone, which
Start
is
of MVAC engine chill.
the second milestone will be stage separation. That's where the first and second stage separate from each other. First stage will start to make its way back to Earth, and the second stage will continue on its journey.
Vehicle is following a nominal trajectory.
As you can see from that replay, that was a beautiful liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Complex 40 at 5:27 and 10 seconds p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 21:27 UTC, now almost exactly 37 minutes ago. The Falcon 9's second stage is in orbit now, in a parking orbit over the Arabian Gulf, heading southeast over the Indian Ocean soon. And eventually, in a few minutes, it'll be passing in range of a ground station on the island of Diego Garcia. And during that acquisition, during that compass, the second stage will reignite its Merlin vacuum engine for about 2 seconds to circularize its orbit at an altitude of nearly 200 miles, or a little more than 300 kilometers. And that will set the stage for deployment of the 53 Starlink internet satellites that are flat packed on the rocket at this point. That deployment is scheduled to occur at T plus 59 minutes and 30 seconds. So about 8 minutes, a little under 8 minutes left until restart of stage 2, and about 11 and a half minutes until the deployment of the newest 53 Starlink internet satellites. The first stage made a successful landing on the drone ship of just read the instructions about 400 miles northeast of Cape Canaveral. So that completed the first stage's job today. This was its 6th flight. And again, as we've reported throughout our coverage today, this mission set a record for the shortest or fastest turnaround between launches for a single Falcon 9 booster stage at 21 days. So this booster launched 21 days ago from Kennedy Space Center, Pad 39A, with the AX-1 private crew mission to the space station. It landed on a drone ship, SpaceX brought it back to Cape Canaveral for refurbishment and inspections, connected it with a new second stage, and then rolled it out to Pad 40 for today's launch. This shows the flight history of this booster that is successfully landed now for a 6th time. So you can add one more image, one more date to this flight history graph for April 29th on the Starlink 4-16 mission. 6 flights now in the books for this booster.
Start of MVAC engine chill.
Now T plus 42 minutes and 15 seconds. We're about 3 minutes away from the restart of SpaceX's upper stage to complete the delivery of the 53 Starlink Internet satellites to the proper orbit this evening. SpaceX launch activity is continuing here on the Florida Space Coast. You're looking now at a live view of Pad 39A, where the strongback or transporter erector arm is currently horizontal at Pad 39A following the launch early Wednesday morning of the Crew 4 mission with 4 astronauts heading to the International Space Station. Those astronauts docked with the space station Wednesday evening on SpaceX's Crew Dragon Freedom spacecraft. This strongback has been lowered after that launch, and SpaceX is expected to have its ground team return that strongback or transporter arm into the hangar on the southern perimeter of Pad 39A sometime soon in the coming hours or days. And in the hangar it will be integrated with the next Falcon 9 rocket that SpaceX is readying for liftoff from Florida. That mission again will be carrying the next batch of Starlink Internet satellites into orbit, and that mission we believe is currently tentatively penciled in for launch on Thursday, May the 5th shortly before sunrise here on the east coast of Florida, and of course we'll have live coverage of that mission when it happens. So that's the view of Pad 39A right now, where the transporter arm, the Strongback, is still at the pad waiting for its rollback in the coming days for integration with the next Falcon 9 vehicle for the next SpaceX launch next week. We showed you Pad 39A. Here's a view of Complex 40, where the Falcon 9 took off less than 45 minutes ago. You can see the Strongback transporter arm at this pad is now in its retract position at an angle of about 45 degrees. That's the angle at which the Strongback retracts at liftoff to clear the way for the Falcon 9 to begin its climb off the pad. And the next launch from this pad, Pad 40, is expected sometime in mid-May right now with another Starlink mission. So the launch cadence continues here on Florida's Space Coast. We're standing by for that restart of the upper stage in a few moments away.
MVAC ignition and MVAC shutdown.
And we've just heard confirmation from SpaceX that that second stage restart has occurred. Already complete, 2-second burn, now complete.
Nominal payload deploy orbit insertion.
And there's the call from SpaceX. Nominal payload deployment insertion has been confirmed. So the rocket has achieved the correct orbit, nearly 200 miles or a little more than 300 kilometers above Earth, a near circular orbit. The target was 304 by 317 kilometers today at an inclination of 53.2 degrees. And the telemetry call out from SpaceX seems to confirm that the orbit was achieved within the proper bounds. And this sets the stage for deployment of the 53 Starlink satellites about 13 minutes from now. We won't have any live video of the payload deployment. We do have this ground track map showing the location of the second stage as it circles planet Earth. And we'll hear the call out. We expect to hear the call out from SpaceX Launch Control when they confirm payload deployment, when those 53 Starlink satellites are cast free of the upper stage.
Expected loss of signal, Diego Garcia.
That call out from SpaceX Launch Control indicates that the Falcon 9 second stage has passed outside the range of the ground station in Diego Garcia. This is an expected loss of signal until the vehicle is reacquired by another ground station. That reacquisition should occur shortly before the payload separation, the deployment of the 53 Starlink satellites. Now about 11 minutes away. Now 53 minutes and 9 seconds since the launch of the Starlink 4-16 mission, the second stage now coasting southwest of Australia, roughly west or west-southwest of Perth, at an altitude of nearly 200 miles. This mission marks the 151st flight of a Falcon 9 rocket. It's the 159th orbital launch attempt conducted by SpaceX since 2006 with the first flight of the Falcon 1 smallsat launch vehicle. It's the 85th. It was the 85th Falcon 9 launch from Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That launch complex was originally built in the 60s for the Air Force's Titan rocket program, and then was transitioned over to SpaceX in 2007 or so, with the first Falcon 9 launching from Pad 40 in 2010. This was the 94th flight that SpaceX has conducted with a reused Falcon booster, and this is the 43rd mission by SpaceX with a primary purpose of deploying Starlink internet satellites. It's the 17th Falcon 9 launch of the year, the 6th just in April, and the 17th orbital launch from Cape Canaveral or Kennedy Space Center to start the year. Now T plus 54 minutes and 35 seconds. We're about 5 minutes away from the deployment of the 53 Starlink internet satellites. Again, we're not expecting to see any live video. SpaceX has ended their live video coverage with the completion of the first burn of the upper stage, but the mission isn't complete. We're still getting audio updates from SpaceX Launch Control. We're still getting this ground track map, and we're going to stay with the mission until its completion, until the deployment of the 53 Starlink satellites. Again, that deployment is expected at T plus 59 minutes and 30 seconds when the Falcon 9 second stage is flying over the ocean south of Australia. Now about 2 minutes remaining until payload separation. 2 minutes until the 53 Starlink satellites are released from the Falcon 9 upper stage. The process to deploy the 53 satellites involves the jettison, essentially, of 4 retention rods. These metal rods hold the Starlink satellites into their launch configuration, flat packed on the second stage of the Falcon 9. And once those retention rods are released, that allows the 53 satellites to float away from the Falcon 9 upper stage in space. There's no mechanism, no propulsive mechanism, no spring, anything like that. Those systems are commonly used in spacecraft separation systems, but the Starlink architecture involves just letting the satellites fly free of the upper stage after the release of these retention rods. Now 1 minute remaining until payload deployment.
Acquisition of signal. Tasmania.
Falcon 9 now in range of a ground station in Tasmania.
Starlink separation confirmed.
And there you have confirmation about an hour since launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The second stage now south of Australia, passing over a ground station in Tasmania. And telemetry relayed through that ground station has confirmed that the 53 Starlink satellites have successfully deployed in orbit. So that wraps up the Starlink 4-16 launch. These satellites will soon begin spreading out in space. They'll deploy solar arrays, they'll run through some automated checkouts, and then they'll activate their propulsion systems. Or ion engines will be turned on to begin pulsing and propelling the satellites to their operational altitude. They'll be raising their orbit from a little under 200 miles to an operational altitude of 335 miles. That process, using this low thrust but highly efficient ion engine system, takes a few weeks to a few months depending on the orbital plane each satellite is going to. With the Starlink 4-16 mission in the books, we're looking ahead now to the next few missions. The next few launches we'll be covering. The next launch on the calendar right now, with an official target launch date, is the Rocket Lab flight of an Electron launch vehicle. That's scheduled for May the 1st, Sunday evening U.S. time. That mission has been delayed nearly 2 weeks now because Rocket Lab is waiting for what they say is ideal weather conditions, good cloud cover conditions, good wind conditions, because Rocket Lab on this mission will be attempting to catch the Electron booster stage with a helicopter for the first time. So this Electron booster, made of carbon fiber, so it's relatively lightweight, but it's about 39 feet long, will be attempting to descend under parachute over the Pacific Ocean downrange from Rocket Lab's launch site in New Zealand, and then a helicopter will swoop in with a long boom to try to snag one of the parachute lines and capture that rocket, and then bring it back. Rocket Lab eventually wants to bring that rocket back to shore without it ever splashing down in the ocean for inspections and refurbishment. Next up after the May 1st launch is the next Falcon 9 flight from here on Florida's Space Coast. That's scheduled for around next Thursday. May the 5th is the current date that we have for that flight. Starlink 4-17 with the next batch of Starlink satellites that'll be launching from pad 39A, which we showed earlier in our live stream at the Kennedy Space Center. And then the next SpaceX launch is currently targeted for May the 8th from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, with another batch of Starlink satellites as SpaceX continues the rapid build-out and deployment of the global broadband internet network. And then on May the 9th, China is scheduled to launch a Long March 7 rocket with a cargo ship, the Tianzhou 4 cargo ship, to the Chinese space station. That will actually set the stage for the launch of the next crew, the next 3-person crew to the Chinese space station sometime in June to begin a 6-month expedition. So there are other launches that may be occurring over the next 10 days or so. A couple of Chinese missions that are unconfirmed, maybe launching satellites over the next 10 days, but these are the launch dates that we currently have confirmed through
official sources or through notices to pilots in the case of the Chinese mission, showing that's targeted for launch on May the 9th. So we're going to wrap up our live coverage now from the Kennedy Space Center. You're looking now live at the empty launch pad, pad 40, where the Falcon 9 took off at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to support our coverage, you can go to spaceflightnow.com, click the Members tab at the top of our homepage, and any contribution you can make to our membership program helps us expand and continue our coverage of all launch activity here on the Space Coast of Florida. We also cover launches from other sites around the country and around the world. We try to keep up with a growing rate of launch activity around the world, and any contribution you can make to that effort greatly helps us in that initiative. So until next time, I'm Stephen Clark reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center. We'll be back next week with the launch of the next SpaceX mission. We'll also be covering the Rocket Lab launch, currently set for no earlier than Sunday night, U.S. time. Until then, have a pleasant weekend. Have a good evening.